It's time to say goodbye to Rugby World Cup with one last chat. My name is Mark. Let's talk rugby. I suppose the best place to start this is with the hosts, France. I think they put on an absolutely fantastic tournament. There are still a lot of salty people in Ireland, but the fact that we didn't get to host this World Cup, but you got to give them their dues on this. I suppose people in Ireland, the thing for us is that the Rugby World Cup is probably the biggest sporting event that we would be able to put on our own. And, just from my point of view, France won the bidding. I don't care about politics or anything like that, about who voted for who or anything like that. I think they did a fantastic job. I hope at some point Ireland will get to host the Rugby World Cup during my lifetime. But back to France. So, they had a few teething problems. They had problems getting people in the stadium in the early round. Then that first round with the anthems was terrible, but then they fixed them, and as the tournament went on, atmosphere was great, and you could see that it's what the Rugby World Cup is about, is all the fans mixing together, and you could see a lot of that happening. The locals as well got really involved in it, and it looked like it was so good that I wanted to be in France for it. And I was lucky enough to be in Japan when the last World Cup was on, and it was, other than around game day or wherever in the city the game was happening on, it was difficult to know that there was a Rugby World Cup going on over there, honestly. Whereas in France, it looked like, everywhere, everyone seemed to be getting involved, and it just, the fact of being in the country, you would know that was on there, and that's full credit to them. I was at the 2007 Rugby World Cup that was in France as well, and that was a complete disaster. So they certainly took on board the lessons from that one and made huge improvements. So again, fair dues to them. They did a fantastic job. Next thing I want to talk about is the disappointing things from the Rugby World Cup, in terms of like teams and that kind of stuff. So the first disappointment for me, and it's not a huge disappointment, but it is Australia. It's not a huge shock that they were disappointing, given that like when Andy Jones came back, they hadn't won a game in the whole run up to the Rugby World Cup. Now they did play France, South Africa, Argentina, and then New Zealand twice in that run, but still, didn't even come close really to winning any of those. And then they only beat the Minnows in their pool as well. But for how bad they were, they almost snuck through into the quarterfinals. Only that Fiji got that losing bonus point against Portugal to get themselves through. It would have been a complete injustice if Australia had gone through. They probably would have been the worst team to make a quarterfinal in the history of the tournament, honestly. But yeah, they were a disappointment. And the other disappointment was Italy. Not disappointed that they didn't beat France or New Zealand or wherever. I'm disappointed the fact that we've seen them grow, between the last World Cup and this World Cup, we've seen them grow a lot, and we've seen them get to the point where they could consistently make it awkward for, tougher teams. So I was just hoping that, they'd have one performance in them against either France or New Zealand, and they didn't. It was a complete capitulation from them, and, contrasted with the likes of Namibia, who were in the same pool as them. Like, Namibia at least kept fighting their games, even though they got hockeyed as well. The heads never went down, and it kept going. So that's kind of disappointing for me from this standpoint of Italy. And being, someone who kind of cheers from the sidelines Italian rugby, because they're part of the URC. I'm always happy when I see Benetton getting better, and I'm always hoping that Zebre will pull off that one win as well. That eluded them last year, but they came so close on so many occasions. And then the national team as well. And I hate all this talk about Italy should be kicked out of the Six Nations and stuff like that. And because for me, the game needs to grow, not to kind of stand still and be kind of swapping teams out. We need to be looking at formats where we can have more teams involved and just makes tournaments bigger and bigger. But yeah, Italy were definitely a disappointment for me. The highlights for me were the minnows, the likes of Chile and Portugal, who did so well. Like Portugal actually beating Fiji was amazing. Chile just, having the guts to play the style of rugby that they played, and again, no heads dropping. Even the likes of Romania and Namibia, heads never dropped through it. The likes of Tonga and Samoa as well, looking strong at times. Samoa probably could have done better, especially the pool that they had. A lot of people probably would have thought that they'd be in with a shout, but they come back there at the end and really gave England a scare as well. So they finished well. So I'm happy for that. And then the other major highlight is that quarterfinal weekend. Easily, I think, the best quarterfinal we've ever seen in Rugby World Cup history, and possibly the best weekend of Test rugby that we've ever seen as well, at least in my lifetime. And yeah, it was just like there was 4 games all decided late on, and all in very close margins as well, all the way through the game. It was nip and tuck between the teams, and it was great to see. And yes, Ireland, New Zealand, and France, South Africa were on another level to, England, Fiji, and Argentina, Wales, but still, those kind of lower level games, as it were exciting, and they nobody who was watching those who was mildly interested in rugby turned any of those games off, because you didn't know right to the end who was going to win. And that's really, I think, what makes rugby games exciting, is that whole thing of being competitive. And it's something that we have to do, harking back to the minnows again, is that we need to support these teams so that we can have more games like this where it is genuinely competitive between teams, and hopefully it's just going to be better and better in the future. And some people said that the mistake that World Rugby made in making the draw too early actually ended up creating this quarterfinal, which has some merit to it. But still, whatever happened, obviously Ireland got knocked out, so I was a bit sad about that, but still thoroughly enjoyed a fantastic weekend of rugby. On to then the final itself. So, well, the semi-finals first. So one semi-final, complete blowout, not really much happening in it in terms of like New Zealand, just kind of procession for them into the final. But England did so well, I thought, to make it, first of all, to the semi-final, and then make it so difficult for South Africa to get into that final as well. And, they were so close to actually doing it. They just needed to find out one more score, or maybe get over for a try, but they weren't able to do it. But still, fantastic performance from them. And then and that was definitely the pick of the semi-finals. It wasn't up to the quality of the quarterfinals, but it had that tension there as well, and which was great. On to the final then. Not full of exciting running rugby, mainly due to conditions, but also, World Cup finals as well are tense affairs, and because of that, teams, will generally perform a little bit in terms of their ability a little bit lower than normal, and normally they're lower scoring than other games as well. And this is the case here too. But both teams, I felt, put on a fantastic final between them. New Zealand unlucky to lose it, but I thought that South Africa, they were deserved winners in the end, because South Africa, they showed through the tournament they're the most adaptable team in World Rugby, at least in the Test arena, because they've so many different ways that they can play and mix and match together as well to actually win a game. And just down with tactic selection, timing of substitutions, like, were all great. Like the way they were so ruthless in that semi-final with, first of all, hooking Lebok after 30 minutes, put on Pollard. Then into the second half, 2 minutes of the half gone, they hook Reinark to get Faf de Klerk on. Then even a few minutes, like not too long later, Estebet is off as well, as they're looking for a fresh impetus there too. And and then the decisions for the final then to leave out the likes of Lebok and Reinhardt completely from the matchday squad just shows that the complete focus that they had on just producing a performance to win the World Cup, and they were able to do that in the end. So fair play to them. I think they're very well deserved world champions, and back-to-back world champions too. Plus the fact that now they now have 4 World Cups, so it's going to be at least 4 years before New Zealand can even score between them. So the Box now have the bragging rights in that regard. But that was pretty much the tournament. I want to talk about now about my player of the tournament. So somebody asked me this in a comment and I answered it, but so this is going to be kind of the same answer again, just in video format. But for the pool stages, I thought the best player in the pool stages was Bundy Aki. He was pretty much player of the match for Ireland in all 4 of their pool games. And if Ireland had to progress further, he would have been able to shout of being player of the tournament. But I don't believe that you can win player of the tournament just on performance in the pool. So he did really well there, and it was great to see that, because generally, if Henshaw had been fit, he probably would have started, and Bundy Aki probably wouldn't have been in matchday squads, because you might have had somebody like Jimmy O'Brien or somebody else who can cover more positions on the bench as well. So for a player who wasn't guaranteed to start at this World Cup before the tournament, he had such an amazing tournament and reminded everyone how important he is to Irish rugby and the Irish team as well. So he's my player of the pool stages. But into the knockout stages then, I felt that for France, Woki was really good. Aldrit has an excellent tournament as well. Olivon was decent too. I thought BLBRE as a young player really lit up the tournament as well while he was there. From the point of view of the semi-finals, the beaten semi-finalists, first of all. So Argentina, so Facundo Isa was excellent in that back row. I thought Montoya was really good. Creevy when he came off the bench as well. Buffelli had some decent performances, but for me, their stand-up player was Kramer, sorry. He was just excellent throughout. He's got that bit of dog about him as well that I like. And yeah, he really performed well for them and was the standout. For England, I thought early on, George Ford was very good in 10, but then Borthwick, he's not Borthwick's 10, and that's very clear given selections, in the last couple of games. But I thought he was really good. I thought that Tuilagi actually had a lot more impact than I felt he was going to have. But we talked about Billy Vunipola being the polar opposite, really. Lack of impact from him. But I thought their best player of the tournament was probably Ben Earl in that back row. Again, Billy Vunipola was the one who was supposed to be starting 8, and he didn't perform. And then Ben Earl got in there and just showed Borthwick, basically forced him to pick him because he was so good. I also thought Toji is looking like he's getting back towards his best too. Could do with a little less of the stupid celebrations all the time, but still a really good player. From the finalists then, we start with New Zealand. So the 3 Barrett brothers, I thought, were excellent throughout. That combination in the midfield, Ioane and Jordie Barrett, those guys just look so good together now. It was a while there where there was a real flux in that midfield in terms of they didn't know who was going to be there. They tried the likes of Leonard Brown in there, and they couldn't really get a combination, but these two just work together. Obviously, Will Jordan, I think he was a top try scorer in the tournament, but all-around game, I don't think he should be in the conversation for best player of the tournament. I thought Talea actually on the opposite wing outshone him in terms of his all-around game. In the pack, then you got to give credit to the likes of Cody Taylor, Retallick. We already mentioned Scott Barrett, but also Whitelock as well. The fact that their line out up to that final went 97% across the entire tournament is, major kudos to them. That is an amazing performance from them. To keep that going all the way through is just so good. Into then the back row, I thought Frizzell was decent, but really not in the conversation for player of the tournament. I thought Sam Kane was on the road to redemption until he got that red card in the final. So now, the knives are out from last year after the series defeat to Ireland, and now maybe knives are going to be out from again because he got a red card in a Rugby World Cup final. But to stand out in their back row, and I think to stand out in their team as well, was Ardi Sabaya. That guy is just pure gold as a player. He's a generational player, and there are always players who for a year or two will perform at the highest level and be up there in the conversation for World Player of the Year. But he's the kind of player similar to Dupont, who's up there in that conversation every year because they're so good all the time. And he was definitely a candidate for me for Player of the Tournament. On to then the Springboks. I felt in the front row, the likes of Malherbe and Kitsov, I felt they didn't perform as well as I expected them to through this World Cup, because Kitsov had an excellent season for the Stormers but didn't quite reach those heights for South Africa. And I actually felt that Oxenche and Nyakane, when they came on, they were actually a better pairing, and we saw their scrum performing better as well. But even around the field, those guys put in a good shift too. Second row, Mostert did so well to fight off all that competition that they had in that second row, and then you had the likes of Klein and Schneemann off the bench as well. All really good performances. Into the back row, Sia Khaleesi having suffered an injury that would keep a mortal person out for a year. He comes back within a couple of months, and then he leads his team to a Rugby World Cup triumph, and he played so well through the tournament as well, and it's just a testament to his character, as a player, and his ability as well. But also he's such a great ambassador for South African rugby, but for rugby overall as well, because the guy, he's so well spoken, and he always has a word for the opposition, or for the wider public as well. He's not just caught up in rugby. He realizes the impact that it's going to have in South Africa as well, and I think he's a real kind of linchpin in that team, and there's a reason why he's the captain. The other back rowers then, Peter Steph Toy and Dwayne Vermeulen, they were unfit at the start of the Rugby Championship. They got they worked their way to fitness through the warm-ups and through the pool stages, and finally I think in the knockout stages started to kind of hit their peaks that we've seen them at before, and just the fitter those guys got, the bigger impact they had as well. In the backs then, I thought Lebok had a decent tournament, even though he was left out of the final. Andre Pollard, obviously, when he came into the squad, really did help them in terms of goal kicking and getting them vital wins. I thought that the midfield partnership actually went pretty well, with Dale Ende and Creelan there, because they're both under pressure for their places, because Esterhazen had a great rugby championship, and Keenan Moody looked like at one point he was going to be the option at 13 as well, but those two just played so well that they held them off. At fullback then, Willemse, I thought, he kind of settled that argument, at least for now, between himself and LaRue of who should be starting fullback. On the wings, Kurtley Arendse had a fantastic tournament. He jumped ahead of Mapimpi on form and then maintained that form throughout as well. Colby back to somewhere near his best as well. It's great to see him, just cutting up defences and just being so elusive as well as running. And, then the player, though, for me, for the box, who stood out the most over the entire tournament was Eben Etzebeth. In that back row, second row, competing in lineouts, but also his work around the field, just his eye as well for a charge down or to get in there and nick a ball as well. He's always on his toes. He's always thinking. Sometimes he's steps over the line a bit. He's very good at the dark arts, but he's got that kind of Richie McCaw type of kind of quality to him, where he seems to get away with a lot of the stuff that he does. They said Richie had a cloak of invisibility. I think Eben maybe borrowed it when he retired, because he does some stuff that other players may get penalised for, but he doesn't, and that's credit to him, I feel. Some people would say, oh, he's a cheat or whatever, but every team tries to cheat, but most teams just get caught doing it. So being able to get away with it, I think is credit to them. But he didn't play in terms of minutes played. Like a lot of the times he's getting taken off after 50 minutes or even before it. But he packed so much in those minutes that he had on the field, and I think because of that, it was a close one for me between himself and Savea. They were the two players who really just stood out across the entire tournament, but Eben just nicks it for me. Okay, so that's pretty much Rugby World Cup talk. I'll just talk briefly about the channel in terms of over the Rugby World Cup, the channel has grown so much, and it's been great to see so many new people coming and being able to interact with them, and a lot of kind of the older people who are with me through the URC and Six Nations and the Champions Cup. So it's a nice mix in there, and I hope people stick with the channel as well, because we're going to be covering a lot of URC, Champions Cup, Six Nations, etc., and a lot of test games into next year and beyond as well. So it's just been fantastic for me to see that growth there, and hopefully you guys have seen as well that there's been improvement in terms of the quality of the videos coming to you as well. And they're going to keep on trying to do that, and trying as well, to give you the kind of content that you want, whether it's chats like this, or it's stats, or it's game reviews, or anything like that. I'm going to, keep a mix of stuff coming, so that people can dip in and out, and maybe people won't watch all my videos, but that's fine. But I'm very grateful for you guys for doing that. And if you're somebody who regularly watches my videos, I just ask that you maybe subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon as well to get notifications. But as I said, there's going to be plenty more coming, so I'm looking forward to chatting to you guys again on future videos.